as it happens, as news unfolds. Follow it all live with the Fox News Update. No one brings it to you like Shepard Smith. Plus, Henry and Shimkus have all the latest.
Follow Fox News Update for exclusive content only on Facebook.
So one thing is for sure right now, the Trump economy is rolling full steam ahead. It's reflected in the NASDAQ, the S&P 500, both hitting record highs on Wall Street. A new measure from Main Street is good news for small business owners. The Consumer Confidence Index just hit its highest number since October of 2000. It's an 18-year high. So we got together a panel of small business owners from different industries to see what they're feeling in terms of the effects of the consumer boom. So thank you very much, all of you, for making some time for us tonight. Frank, let me start with you. Your business, you have a salon and wellness spa here in New York. What's the impact of the Trump economy on you? How do you see it?
You know, I really see a lot of people with a lot of confidence. I'm noticing that people are coming in more frequently, but more interesting is I've been watching people, to be honest with you, spend more on larger ticket items.
Really?
Hair extensions, that great color of those highlights, the balayages, the bigger ticket items. I've seen people coming in and not saying, oh my God, can I spend that money?
Right.
They're saying, you know something, I feel good about spending that money.
Interesting. Heather, let me go to you. Your business is, and sort of how do you see it?
Well, our business is a fitness, small boutique studio.
Right.
Our sales in particular have quadrupled this year, but I would equate that more to people wanting to purchase value. Value for themselves, value for their community, and supporting the local businesses. So that's where I see.
You think, I mean, they may have more money in their pocket. They might have a little bit, they got a tax cut. You know, in New York, it's a little complicated in terms of the tax cut, as you guys well know.
Yeah.
Tosh, what's the impact that you see? Because you see consumer confidence at such a high. You have the tax cut impact. You have regulations that are much lower now. You're in a healthcare company. Do you see the regulatory changes as impacting you at all?
We in the healthcare business at Ash Center for Prevention, we're right at the forefront of feeling the tax cut impact, and it's been such a powerful impact for everybody. It's been so stimulating for the economy. Essentially, people now want to spend on prevention. They want to have those ancillary services like hair rejuvenation at our Ash Center, or the skin rejuvenation, or the extensions in other salons like you mentioned, or doing their DNA sequencing, trying to understand how not to get sick, how to prevent that.
So yes, interesting. So people are spending money on themselves, and they're feeling the freedom to do that kind of thing that they might not have wanted to do in the past.
The moment they're focused on prevention and wellness, that's music to the whole economy. Because essentially what that means is it's all going to be positive from here. Americans are going to have better health. They're going to be spending their money at the right places. The tax cut for our business from 35% to 21% means an immense amount of numbers.
I agree. All right.
It means 14%.
Let me hear from Dan in the back here. You know, if you could talk to President Trump, because he's a New Yorker, and he likes to talk to a lot of people in business, you know, what would you say to him? You know, I feel good, but this would concern me.
Well, I guess just keeping the momentum of consumer confidence and making sure that we can keep the momentum. You know, if business owners don't feel confident about tomorrow, they're not going to open new restaurants. They're not going to expand.
And what's your business?
Web development and marketing.
Okay.
So most of my businesses, like Frank is a client of ours, you know, he feels good about the economy. He's expanding the salon. I have friends who are opening multiple restaurants right now. I have a client who's opening a
So were you surprised by that? You know, after President Trump was elected, you know, and everybody, Paul Krugman said the market was going to tank and never recover. So were you concerned when he was elected? And when did you start to think, well, maybe it's actually going to be really good?
I mean, I think of what was potentially the alternate, I actually felt pretty good about it. I felt that we were going in the right direction and that he had a lot of good plans. So I was actually very well assured. Surprised, but assured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Heather, talk to me about you're in interior design, which obviously is something that people choose to do. They don't have to do it. Has your business picked up?
Actually, my business is brand new, and I think it's a testament to the economy that I felt comfortable opening and going out on my own. I kind of was dipping my toes in the water, and things have been so good, and I've gotten calls to do more and more design, so I went ahead and went for it big time. So because
you feel like the economy kind of pulled you into starting a business.
Yeah, I
essentially. Demand made it an opportunity for you that maybe wasn't there before.
Yeah, I'm able to make a living now. This is my second career. I have 3 kids at home, and it felt like the right time to really go for it, my dream, and make it happen.
So one of the things that, when you talk to economists, they say that they're concerned about these trade wars with China, and that perhaps the economic growth that we've been clearly seeing could dampen if that continues, if there's trade wars with the EU, with the UK, and China's clearly a big. Anybody feel like that could be a concern for their business?
I think it's a positive thing for America.
Yeah.
Because buy your American products, be an American, go for what you have to support your local economy to start with, and then a greater national economy. So I really believe the impact, whatever we have, is going to be positive eventually, very, very soon, because everybody will start to spend their dollar, which is being, which they have saved through the tax cuts, in buying American stuff. So I think it's a great thing.
The president said the other day in an interview that he did with Ainsley Earhardt, he said, if I get impeached, the economy is going to tank. Do you agree or disagree?
Disagree. I disagree. I think that's just a lot of hype. I think that's kind of like trying to speak things into existence. That's just not the reality. The truth of the matter is most Americans truly understand that this president has really, really, truly impacted them in a positive way. Even if you don't agree with his policies, you've learned that you're making some money.
Thank you very much, you guys. We got to leave it there. We're going to say good night. Tucker's up next from D.C. We'll see you back here tomorrow night at 7. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, guys.
This is a Fox News alert. It is election night in many states, and we already have a race to call in the state of Florida. Big show ahead. But first, Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry is live for us in Miami tonight. Ed?
Tucker, good to see you. The polls have just closed here in the Sunshine State, and Fox News is projecting that Congressman Ron DeSantis is going to win the Republican primary for governor. This is a big race, the Trump factor front and center. We are projecting tonight that he will beat former Congressman Adam Putnam. He's currently the state agriculture commissioner. Here's the bottom line. Back in June, when Fox News had a big debate between these two Republican contenders, DeSantis was trailing big time, double digits. And then within days, President Trump endorsed DeSantis. We then saw him take a double-digit lead. In recent days, it had closed a bit. Putnam had outraised him in the money department. He had knocked on hundreds of thousands of doors. There had been some expectation here on the ground in Florida. Maybe Putnam could pull this out, but we are projecting just the opposite. Ron DeSantis, a key ally of President Trump, is going to win this Republican nomination primary battle for the gubernatorial race. There's 3 big candidates on the Democratic side. That we're not ready to call. It's still too close to call. We'll be back later this hour as more results come in. Tucker?
Amazing. Decisive. Ed Henry, thanks a lot.
Good to see you.
Well, as you just saw, polls have closed in Florida. Voting is still underway in other states, including Arizona and Oklahoma. Voters there will decide a series of critically important primary contests that will help define the fall midterm elections. We're going to have more on those races straight ahead. But first, a lot going on in Washington as well. Lawmakers grilled Bruce Orr in closed-door hearings on Capitol Hill today. Republicans say that Orr played a central role in the Obama Justice Department's investigation into the 2016 Trump campaign. Fox News chief intelligence correspondent Catherine Herridge has been covering the story since the very beginning, and she joins us tonight.
Well, thanks, Tucker. The closed-door deposition lasted 7 hours with a consensus among Republican lawmakers. The Justice Department official Bruce Orr told the FBI there were issues with the Trump dossier and its author, former British spy Christopher Steele, but the evidence suggests the National Security Court was kept in the dark when it authorized a surveillance warrant for Trump campaign aid. One lawmaker said Orr's answers about the timing and handling of the dossier do not line up with other witnesses, including former FBI lawyer Lisa Page, who sent anti-Trump texts, and Glenn Simpson, whose firm Fusion GPS was paid by the DNC and Clinton campaign for the anti-Trump research. With more than 2 decades of government service, Orr's portfolio at the Justice Department was gangs and drugs, not Russia. But in 2016, documents show Orr became the back channel between FBI officials and Steele after the Bureau fired him as a confidential source. Earlier today, Orr ignored Fox's questions.
Mr. Orr, who authorized your contact with the FBI? Mr. Orr, were you acting alone, or did you have authority from a Justice Department official? How did your wife benefit from the dossier contract? Did you have a conflict of interest? Mr. Orr, will you take our questions?
Lawmakers also told reporters today that Orr had a conflict because his wife, Nellie Orr, was part of that firm that put together the dossier, and she specifically did Russia research. Tucker.
Catherine Harris, thanks a lot for that. Molly Hemingway, the Federalist, joins us tonight. Molly, do we know if the FBI was aware that Bruce Orr's wife, Nellie, worked at Fusion GPS?
The FBI should have been, that information should have been made available to the court, and it was not made available to the court. We still need to know what the FBI knew and when it knew it.
To what extent do we have a final answer on the question to what extent the Steele dossier allowed this spying to proceed and the investigation to continue?
We know that the Steele dossier was used to help secure a warrant on to surveil Christopher, or to surveil a Trump campaign associate. We have. And that is pretty explosive information. When you think about it, when we started learning about this, the idea that this dossier, which was a Hillary Clinton funded and originated campaign document, the idea that it would have been weaponized and used by our intelligence agencies was pretty explosive. And now we all have to acknowledge that it was.
Bruce Orr seems like the critical link. I mean, here's a guy, as Catherine Harris just reported, who was not a Russia expert, whose main role seemed to be facilitating connection between a federal law enforcement agency and his wife's firm, but the court never learned that. Why is that not rotten? Why is that not corrupt?
Well, and Bruce Orr was not at the FBI. He was not working on this FBI investigation. He was funneling the information, and he was funneling the information after the FBI had claimed that they had terminated Christopher Steele as a source. They claimed that they terminated him and that they would not use his information because they realized that he had been leaking to the media contrary to what his arrangement was with the FBI, but they still managed to use his information.
So you could be, you know, the fiercest Trump opponent politically and still have grave concerns as a civil libertarian and an American about the way this was conducted, couldn't you?
In fact, your feelings about Trump should have nothing to do with your feelings about whether this was
I couldn't agree more. So where are the civil libertarians in this?
It's a very good question, and this is something that really is important, because if this can be done against a major presidential campaign, it certainly can be done against other people. There are so many questions that need to be answered. Perhaps there really is a good explanation for why this all went down, but the idea that people should just be forced to accept that it was okay without getting answers to basic questions about why this investigation started, when it really started, when it officially started, when it unofficially started, what was used. We do know already something very bad, which is that the Hillary Clinton funded and created research document was used by by the FBI to secure a wiretap.
It's almost unbelievable. So there's another piece of it, too, that I want you to respond to. So Republican Congressman Mark Meadows says that the FBI and DOJ have developed a creative workaround in order to get surveillance warrants on people they want to target. Here's his account of it.
We know that some people at the Department of Justice and FBI actually gave information to the media. Then the stories were reported. Then they used those reports to justify further investigations. You know, that's like saying, well, we're going to incriminate on one hand and be the jury on the other. It just doesn't work that way.
So I should just note, it's still murky. A lot of this is murky, but the FBI appears to be pushing back against this story, telling Fox News that this is actually incorrect and this is not the way they went about getting warrants. Yep. What's your view of this?
We're getting different reports about what exactly was said. We do know, though, we know this from the Inspector General report that came out about the Hillary Clinton email investigation, that there's an epidemic of leaking at the FBI. This is something that was so severe that the IG actually spun it off into a separate investigation because it is so bad that people with security clearances are having dozens of contacts with reporters. It's also something that anyone with a pulse could figure out if they were paying attention for the last 2 years, that there were so many leaks of classified information, whether it was about the dossier, whether it was about the briefing of the dossier to the president, or about other matters such as Mike Flynn's conversations. These were all leaked to the media, and so we do know that we have a very serious problem. When you're doing a leak, you're doing it for a purpose. I think we need to know more about what the purpose is behind all these leaks. We also know that from what we do know of the FISA application, that media reports were used in that FISA application, media reports that were sourced to the creator of the Russia dossier himself. We we should have a very high standard for what we take to a FISA court and how we use news reports.
Well, you'd think any sensible judge would laugh at an application that contained a report from BuzzFeed News or Yahoo or any news organization. I mean, it's the FBI, it's the DOJ. They should have their own data, right?
They're also mentioned in the application an opinion story from the Washington Post, which might not meet the standard that you would hope for in an application.
The closer you get, the less impressive it is. Molly, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Richard Goodstein served as an advisor to both Bill and Hillary Clinton and survived. He joins us tonight. So, Richard, we've established the left has been pretty clear on it. They don't have any problem, since all the civil libertarians have left the party, they don't have any problem with the fact that the last administration spied on its political opponents during this campaign. So tell me if you would have a problem with this. The next election is coming up. A year and a half from now, we're going to be right in the middle of the primaries for the 2020 election. Would you be okay with the Trump administration authorizing a wiretap or surveillance of aides to the leading Democratic candidate during the primaries? Yeah. No, you wouldn't. Oh, you wouldn't. That would bother you. You'd become a civil libertarian again.
So there was no spying, Tucker. Please, you're insulting your audience and everybody.
There was no spying.
What there was somebody, Carter Page, who was identified by U.S. intelligence as somebody who was an agent of the Soviets, who was one of 5 people that Donald Trump said were his foreign policy advisors.
But, so there was no FISA? Hold on, wait, you're blowing my mind here, because I've been sort of on this for the last year and a half. I thought there was a FISA warrant to spy on him. But that's not real. There was no FISA warrant?
Of course there was.
So what's that warrant for? It's for spying on someone, isn't it?
Well, no, it wasn't really spying. What they were doing was authorizing. Well, listen, you know, you're trying to parse something that's not funny.
I'm trying to parse. I'm trying to speak English.
Excuse me, George Papadopoulos bragged about the fact months before anybody had ever heard of Carter Page in our world, about the fact that the Russians had dirt on Hillary Clinton. He bragged about that, and that was pretty alarming to U.S. intelligence. So they authorized somebody.
So that's why he was charged for espionage, right? Was Papadopoulos charged for espionage? Oh no, he wasn't. Okay, just trying to refresh my memory.
Ultimately,
but hold on, very quick. Let's just get back to the beginning.
He pled guilty to a felony.
Oh, to espionage? Oh no, to lying to federal agents, just like Martha Stewart. But let me ask you a question. How is that not spying? If you get a warrant to spy on someone and surveil that person, maybe it's justified. You're arguing a different point. My point is, though, it is spying, and to say it's not spying is, of course, the definition of dishonesty. Right?
No. So the Trump people insist that Carter Page was not working in the campaign as of the time that the FISA warrant was authorized. And don't forget, it was several Republican judges, and only Republican judges, who authorized it time and time and time again.
You would be cool. Okay, you would be cool if the Trump administration got its Department of Justice to get a FISA warrant to not spy, but to surveil for perfectly good reason on aides to the leading Democratic candidate in this next election. Because we've set a precedent here that that's totally fine as long as someone mentions the word Russia. So you're not going to complain about that when it happens. Oh, it's not.
Tucker, you don't have enough time in the show, not just my segment, for me to go through all the elements that we see as collusion-related, right?
Okay. And who's been charged for collusion? Anyone? Has anyone been charged for collusion? Oh, nobody has been.
Listen, nobody was charged. Vandersloot hadn't been charged when you knew his name. Papadopoulos hadn't been charged when you first heard his name. All those Russians that were charged by Mueller hadn't been charged until
we're Natalie Holloway territory now. This is big. This conspiracy. I didn't realize that part of it was taking place in Aruba. But let me ask you though.
We don't know what.
Okay.
We don't make a joke about it.
I'm not. No, I think this is inherently a joke, but a bad joke, a sad joke. And again, I just want to get back to first principles here. I want to know, because Trump will not always be president. We will have other presidents, God willing. And at that point, is it okay to behave like this if Trump is not the target? Is this a precedent that you're comfortable with? It's a really simple question. Does any of this bother you at all? We're doing things that have never been done. The Obama people did something that's never been done that I'm aware of. They spied on a rival presidential campaign. And that's okay with you, but would it be okay if Trump did it to the next guy? It's a really simple question.
They didn't spy on a rival campaign. They spied on a Russian agent, a single Russian agent.
He's a Russian agent.
You think that's a joke
No.
You think that's well,
no,
that's not my
I think
conclusion.
you're accusing an American citizen
says.
of a crime for which he has not been charged. So I'm going to leave that between you and your libel lawyer to sort out. But keep in mind, the person you just accused of being a Russian agent has denied it and never been charged with it, and there's no evidence that he was. So it's a very heavy thing to say about a fellow American,
Truth
I would
is a
argue.
defense. Truth, you know what? If he comes after me for libel, truth is a defense. I think I have the whole intelligence community of the United States backing me up on that one.
There is no intelligence community. There are a bunch of people who work for intel agencies, and they work for us. And we have a right to know what they're doing, and we don't. And that is very troubling. And the question is, are you comfortable with that?
Well, which is why Bruce Orr should have had a public hearing. In Watergate, we had one public hearing after another. Why don't they have, you know why? Because it would be like Benghazi, and it would backfire in their face.
Benghazi? What does Benghazi have to do with it?
Because the Benghazi hearings with Hillary, especially after 11 and a half hours, it was shown, even by Trey Gowdy's own admission, that she hadn't done anything wrong. That's why they don't have Bruce Orr publicly. You know that as well as I do.
I think that as many of these hearings as possible ought to be public. I think the rationale for spying on an American citizen and destroying his life and accusing him of colluding with a foreign power, I think we should know all of that. I think we should bring transparency, because I am losing faith that our system is on the level. I'm beginning to think it is rotten, and the people who run it are corrupt, and they don't have my interest as a taxpayer and a citizen in mind when they do these things. And I'm just telling you, take Trump out of this. This is scary stuff that Obama did, really scary. And I know we're not allowed to criticize Obama because he's a holy man, but let's be totally honest. You shouldn't do stuff like that because it's a terrible precedent.
No, you, as a presidential campaign, you should not be having your son and campaign manager and son-in-law meet with Russians to get dirt. You, as a presidential candidate, shouldn't be encouraging Russians to break U.S. law to steal goods from your opponent. That's what shouldn't be happening. And if the Democrat did it, shame on them.
Look, the Hillary Clinton campaign and the DNC paid for information from the Russian government to use against their opponent.
The Russians
There's no
approached
debate
Trump.
about. There's no debate about that. Whatever, but I don't even care about that. I don't want to relitigate it. I just want to know what the next election's going to be like. I don't want the Trump administration to spy on rival campaigns. But you and the lunatics on the left have created a precedent that will allow them to, and future presidents to do that. And I don't want to live in that country. That's all I'm saying.
Well,
and I don't think you do either.
And we have a fundamental disagreement. You tend to belittle what the Russians did. I actually think they undermine. As Dick Cheney said, it was an attack on the U.S. Sorry, that's me.
Spare me. Richard, thank you.
My pleasure.
Well, CNN had a huge story that turned out to be hugely false. They're not embarrassed, though. Why is that? Also breaking this evening, Fox is tracking the primaries in 3 states. There are 2 races Fox News has projected in Florida. Congressman Ron DeSantis has, we can say, won the GOP gubernatorial primary in that state. And current Governor Rick Scott is, no surprise, projected to win the Republican nomination for the U.S. Senate. We'll have live results throughout the night, so stay tuned to Fox. CNN is engulfed in something of a scandal tonight about ethics and accuracy that gets right to the heart of what they do. Michael Cohen's lawyer, Lanny Davis, now claims that he fed this story to CNN. Watch.
Well, Chris, tonight, sources with knowledge tell myself and Carl that Michael Cohen claims that then-candidate Donald Trump knew in advance about the June 2016 meeting in Trump Tower in which Russians were expected to offer his campaign dirt on Hillary Clinton. Crucially, these sources tell us that Cohen is willing to make that assertion to the special counsel, Robert Mueller. I should say that contacted by CNN, one of Cohen's attorneys, that is Lanny Davis, he declined to comment. And, of course, Chris, I know you're speaking to Rudy Giuliani, the president's attorney, and I'll leave his response to you.
So on July 26, CNN said with a straight face that Lanny Davis did not comment on the story. That was a lie. Not only did he comment, he was a main source. He admits that now. He also says that he can't actually corroborate most of the story.
You said that Michael Cohen was present for a meeting with then-candidate Trump and his son Don Jr. about the Trump Tower meeting. This is obviously an incredibly important issue. You've also said that Michael Cohen testified truthfully to the Senate Intelligence Committee, and according to the chair and the vice chair of the committee, he told them that he had no knowledge of the meeting until he saw it in the press. How can both those things be true? Either he knew about the meeting or he didn't know about the meeting.
Well, I think the reporting of this story got mixed up, and in the course of a criminal investigation, we were not the source of the story.
Keep in mind, the network slogan is facts first. Well, not tonight. CNN seems unembarrassed by these revelations and is standing by the story, whatever that means. They say they have additional sources supporting the story, just not the lawyer for the man at the center of the story, who, of course, would know. Odd. Glenn Greenwald is a journalist and he founder of The Intercept, and he joins us tonight. Glenn, what do we make of this story?
I find it to be, and obviously this is a high bar, one of the most humiliating and scandalous moments in the entire media behavior of the Trump-Russia saga. You know, I've been on your show to talk about a lot of these humiliating moments, and this might be one of the worst ones yet. Keep in mind that in addition to all the facts that you just said, what's so crucial about this is that after Lanny Davis went on CNN with Anderson Cooper, and to Anderson Cooper's shock, admitted that everything CNN had been breathlessly hyping is true, was actually false, namely that Michael Cohen was there when Trump learned about the Trump Tower meeting in advance. The Washington Post and the New York Post listened to that and they said, wait a minute, we independently confirmed CNN stories based on an anonymous source, and our anonymous source was Lanny Davis, who's now saying the whole thing is false. So they did what they had to do and what they should have done, which is they retracted the story. They outed their own source. They said our anonymous source is Lanny Davis, and we now retract it because he says it's false. CNN couldn't do that because they lied to the entire world. They said, as you just played, that they tried to get a hold of Lanny Davis and he refused to comment, when in fact, of course, Lanny Davis was also their source, and they don't want to admit that they lied to the world, so they can't retract the story. And they can't admit they lied, so they're just continuing to stick to what everybody knows is a lie, but not many people care because people think, a lot of people anyway, that it was done for the right political agenda.
So, I mean, it seems kind of stunning that they could continue to claim that they're not retracting. I mean, there is a pretext for not retracting it, according to them, which is that they have other sources who are telling them that this happened. But wouldn't Lanny Davis, as the personal attorney of the man at the center of the story, wouldn't he kind of be the most basic of all sources?
I mean, it makes no sense, right? I mean, theoretically, it's possible, I guess, like in the most theoretical sense, that Michael Cohen is telling, Carl Bernstein or Wolf Blitzer or whoever on the side something that he's then having his lawyer go and deny, which is, oh no, I do have dirt on Trump and I'm going to tell it to Robert Mueller, and then having his lawyer go and deny that. I guess that's theoretically true, but of course that didn't happen. What other sources could CNN possibly have, given what the claim is? The claim is Michael Cohen intends to go and tell Robert Mueller that he was there when Trump got advance knowledge of the Trump Tower meeting. If Lanny Davis is saying his own client has denied that under oath to Congress twice, both last year and then again after the CNN meeting, how could any other source possibly be in a position to dispute that? It's ludicrous, the entire posture of CNN.
So very quickly, we're almost out of time, but you've been in journalism a long time, so give us some context. Doesn't CNN have some kind of obligation to viewers to explain what this is all about?
That, to me, is the real issue. Journalists rightly demand transparency from powerful institutions. That's our job.
Yes.
But how can CNN have any credibility to do that when you call them and ask them what happened here, as I did and everyone else did, and they say, talk to our PR spokesperson, who then refuses to answer any questions? They have zero credibility if they don't provide transparency themselves.
Amen. That is the standard. I hope we can all live up to it. Glenn Greenwald, thank you very much for that. It looks like Hillary Clinton's illegal private email server was, brace yourself for the irony, hacked by the Chinese. Kind of a big story. No one seems to care. We do, though. We've got details after the break. Well, lunatics and dumb people in Washington have wasted the last 2 years of your life in a frenzy over Russia's supposed influence in our elections. Lost in the hyperbole and commotion and hysteria has been a real story: China's active, pervasive, and ongoing espionage against our country. Most of the press seems completely uninterested in that, but we are interested in it. Now, according to a new report by the Daily Caller, a Chinese-owned company successfully hacked Hillary Clinton's private email server, the illegal one that we used to talk so much about, and by doing that, got real-time access to the emails she sent and received as Secretary of State. Kind of a shocking story. Dr. Michael Pillsbury is author of The 100-Year Marathon, China's Secret Strategy to Replace America as the Global Superpower, the single best book on that subject, and he joins us tonight. Dr. Pillsbury, thank you for coming on. So we have a story about this that seems solidly sourced. But my question to you is broader. Does this seem possible? Does it seem likely? Does it shock you?
It explains a lot, frankly. Hillary Clinton had a lot of problems with the Chinese, and they often seemed to know her moves in advance. I remember she was criticized by the blind lawyer who she negotiated for his freedom, finally got him out. He was abandoned at a critical moment in the process, in the hospital where he was, and the Chinese began to treat him quite badly. If this story is true, and it's a single intelligence source telling the story, and if the Chinese could, in fact, read her emails for 4 years, this really is going to cause us to rewrite the history of the pivot. Remember, President Obama wanted to pivot to Asia, doing more about China. If the Chinese were reading the Secretary of State's emails for 4 years, it makes it look quite different. It looks like they would know a lot more about what Obama and Hillary were up to, and they could plan accordingly. So, yes, I was shocked by the story. It's quite surprising to me that it's taken 3 years to come out. The story seems to be saying that FBI agents got intelligence that Hillary's emails were being copied to a Chinese company, and they went over and warned no less than Sally Yates herself, and she wouldn't do anything about it. Then when Comey testified in public about the whole email story, he knew if this story today is accurate, and then he left that out of his testimony. There's a vague reference in his book to things that are still classified. But I just checked tonight, Tucker, the word China in the index of Jim Comey's book. There's nothing there at all.
This is one of those stories that, if it is true, and it looks like it is true, would be a scandal, I think, on the next level. Another story that we're not hearing a lot about, but I think is also fascinating. Senator Dianne Feinstein of San Francisco, she serves on the Senate Intelligence Committee, employed a suspected Chinese spy as a personal aide and driver for 2 decades.
Yes.
So why wouldn't that be a member of the Senate Intel Committee employing a member of Chinese intelligence or someone working for Chinese intelligence?
It's surprising, and it's a bit ironic because Senator Feinstein has been quite outspoken for more than 20 years as a champion of China. When she was mayor of San Francisco, Shanghai was the sister city. She visited there a lot with her husband, who does business in China. So this amounts to spying on a friend of China. Senator Feinstein is not sort of a hawk on China, who's been a critic. But more recently, she's been changing her views. She actually supported the so-called CFIUS reform to crack down on Chinese investment in America. She's one of the original co-sponsors of the bill, actually. So if the Chinese were worried that she's slowly beginning to get more concerned about China, they would have a spy for 20 years. I hate to use the word spy. She says it was just her driver and he had no access to classified information. But he could certainly listen in on what a senator was doing with China for 20 years. This is another example that is going to cause us, I'm afraid, Tucker, to have to rethink what's been going on in U.S.-China relations the last 10 or 20 years.
Yes, we're so naive.
They may have outsmarted us beyond even what I claimed in my book.
It sure seems that way, but we should be honest about it. We should not lie or cover up, I think. Dr. Pillsbury, thank you, as always, for your perspective. We're going to take you to Florida, where we're going to bring you a live report from the election in progress. Polls have closed. We've got the latest on that. Stay tuned. Well, for years, the DNC has maintained quotas for men and women on its committees. Now they've added another category for people who identify as gender binary, meaning neither male nor female. We're supposed to think of this as great, and on one level, it's not a big deal. Most Americans could care less how people dress or look or call themselves. This is a highly tolerant country. But there's a much deeper issue here. You're starting to see people deny the reality of biological sex. Men and women are not real. They're not actual categories. They're constructs imposed by society. That is ridiculous, as any biology teacher can tell you. Excuse me. This is more than that, more than dumb. It's an attack on science, this new orthodoxy, and on reality itself. The rest of us have an obligation to say that, not to hurt anyone's feelings, but because it's important. Telling obvious truths isn't bigotry, it's essential. Otherwise, we will all go insane. So we should be honest. This is a Fox News alert. Polls have closed in the state of Florida, and voting is underway in a handful of other primaries, including Oklahoma and Arizona. Ed Henry's been following all of this from his base in Miami tonight, and he joins us now. Hey, Ed.
Tucker, we may have a big surprise in the Democratic primary for governor. I'll get to that in a minute, but also maybe a surprise on the Republican side. Ron DeSantis, the congressman, with President Trump's endorsement, has won the primary, not by a little, but by a lot. Fox News projecting victory there. Adam Putnam has actually conceded. Bottom line is, in several of these races, we're seeing the power of the president's coattails, including the power of a single presidential tweet. That is exactly what we saw in this Republican primary for Florida governor. Ron DeSantis beating out Adam Putnam. And what we specifically saw is a dramatic turnaround. In mid-June, Mason-Dixon polling had Putnam beating DeSantis by 15 points. Then about a week later, June 22nd, you see the president tweeted his endorsement of DeSantis. Well, I can tell you by late July, DeSantis was up by 12 points, a 27-point swing. Putnam had a big fundraising advantage, had been knocking on thousands of doors, and yet still lost big tonight. Then look at the Trump factor in Arizona, where there's primary tonight. Republican Senator Jeff Flake retired in large part because he's at odds with the Trump agenda and couldn't get reelected. And in fact, he's so toxic to Republicans, he endorsed Congresswoman Martha McSally. She said she doesn't want the endorsement because she's competing with Dr. Kelly Ward and Sheriff Joe Arpaio over who is more pro-Trump. The winner of this GOP primary likely to face Congresswoman Kyrsten Sinema in a pickup opportunity for Democrats, which is why McSally has been making the case that if she wins, she can be a firewall for the president against liberals like Elizabeth Warren in the Senate. Now, back here in Florida, Fox News also projecting Republican Governor Rick Scott has easily won the GOP nomination for a Senate seat against incumbent Democrat Bill Nelson, who may be in more trouble than Democrats originally anticipated. Interesting because there's some big issues here in the Sunshine State. Red tides killing dead marine life. That's come up. Toxic blue-green algae messing with the water and air quality here. So the fate of the Trump agenda is kind of the dominant issue. But as you know, Tip O'Neill famously said, all politics is local. There's a lot of local issues. I mentioned the Democratic race. Look at the numbers, almost 80% in. And Gwen Graham, who's more the establishment candidate, is about 31.9% for the Democratic race for governor. Andrew Gillum, who has the support of Bernie Sanders on the socialist side, at 33%. He's actually winning. He may get the nomination to face Ron DeSantis, this big Trump ally, for governor here in Florida to succeed Rick Scott, the Republican governor. So you may have someone more on the socialist side facing Ron DeSantis. Some big developments here in Florida tonight, Tucker.
Ed Henry, a lot going on. Thank you for that. We'll be tracking the results all night. Yep. First, we've got an update from South Africa for you. According to news reports, the South African government has withdrawn its farmland redistribution bill less than a week after we on this show reported on the story. The South African government hated our segment and said so. They also hated President Trump's response to it. He tweeted out a response. They'd counted on not being criticized, particularly from America. The story, though, is far from over. Politicians in South Africa are still planning to seize land without compensation on racial grounds. In fact, it seems to be underway. South African media report that one of the first farmers on the list is a man called Johan Steenkamp. He owns a game preserve. Now, apologists for the South African government, and there are many in our media, say that the point of seizing land is to redress historical injustices, and there have been a lot of those in South Africa. But that doesn't apply here at all, and in a lot of these cases, but specifically this one, it does not apply. Steenkamp didn't steal his farm from anyone. In fact, he says he bought it legally 21 years ago. That's significant because 21 years ago, apartheid was over. Nelson Mandela was president at the time. But the government is taking it away from him anyway because he's the wrong color. Western liberals support this. Barack Obama supports it. So does British Prime Minister Theresa May. So does pretty much our entire ruling class and our news media. They are all in favor of collective punishment based on race. And that is the real story here. Much bigger than what's happening in South Africa. The West's response to it. It's terrifying. Chuck Schumer wants to rename a Senate office building after his colleague John McCain. Why? Dana Perino joins us after the break with her view on that. It's interesting. You know, it wasn't that long ago, it was actually exactly 10 years ago, that a lot of Democrats and their faithful allies in the press corps were slandering John McCain as a racist, a radical, a right-wing buffoon. How dare he run against Barack Obama? That was then. Now, they want to name buildings after him.
So I'll be introducing a resolution with Senator Flake to change the name of the Russell Building to the McCain Building. But it need not be the only way we honor Senator McCain. We can honor him by trying to carry out the principles he lived by.
You know, you wouldn't want to question the sincerity of Chuck Schumer, but you got to kind of wonder what this is about. Dana Perino is co-host of The Five, and she joins us tonight with her view of it.
Hi, Tucker.
Hey, Dana. So, look, I mean, I love moments of bipartisan comedy, which they, you know, as they used to call it. So I don't want to be too cynical, but I'm also starting to wonder a little bit what exactly this reaction is about. How sincere is it, would you say?
I think that it is sincere, but it's also very politically clever on behalf of Senator Schumer. You're right. If you think back, that Democrats loved John McCain when he was going against President Bush in the 2000 campaign. They could not stand him when he was against Obama, but then they loved him again when he was the foil against President Trump. I do believe that McCain had such an impact on many lives in the Senate. And Richard Russell, the building that is the main Senate building, there's 3 of them, but that's where the senior senators are. It is named after a guy that today, absolutely, you would question whether or not a building should be named after him based on today's standards. This is a guy who was against the Civil Rights Act. He was pro-segregation. Okay, so on the merits, you could see that that would be true. But the other thing that Senator Schumer has done is he has ensured that the Republicans are going to be divided on this issue. Today, a bipartisan group was put together by Senator McConnell talking about a range of issues and ways that the Senate could honor McCain. The renaming of the building was not on it. Senator Schumer earlier was asked, does McConnell support renaming the building? He says, you'll have to ask him. And all of these candidates on the Republican primaries are going to be asked, are you for renaming this building? And they'll face 2 things. One, it's a distraction. They'd rather talk about the accomplishments of the Trump administration and the Republican Congress. But number 2, it ensures that the members of Congress and the senators, do you think that they want to get on the record talking about this when President Trump is watching? You just heard Ed Henry's report. One tweet from President Trump can make a huge difference, and you can win by 27 points in a primary.
No, it's a totally fair point. I wonder, just as a matter of justice, there was one member of the House who 10 years ago compared John McCain to George Wallace and tried to tie him to the 1963 Birmingham church bombings that killed those little girls. Shouldn't people who said things like that apologize at some point, maybe?
You would think that maybe